A police officer and her husband are being accused of child rape and other accusations that you are not going to believe. My name is Matthew Fifer. I'm a therapist who analyzes the behavior behind high-profile true crime cases. In this episode of Criminal Motives, we're going to be analyzing the case of Samantha Peline and her husband, Daniel Furan. So be sure to like, share, subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. With all that being said, let's watch this next video together. I'll give you my thoughts afterwards. But for now, let's get into it.
When a Massachusetts police officer and her husband were arrested this week, needless to say, this added an element of shock. But it's when you hear the details about what allegedly happened in the couple's home involving their adopted son that I would just say maybe you throw in anger and disgust. The officer was put on leave. Members of multiple law enforcement agencies showed up at their home at 6 a.m. to arrest them both, and they were brought before a judge to hear the allegations against them. We're talking about 31-year-old Samantha Peline. I've also heard it Samantha Peline, but we'll go with Peline, and her husband, 37-year-old Daniel Furan. And they are both facing charges of child rape. And before we dive into the couple's arraignment and their push for bail, I just want to give you a little bit of background here. So according to the media outlet WCVB, on March 15th, a 21-year-old man went to the Massachusetts State Police Barracks to report that both Peline and Furan had sexually assaulted him for years, starting when he was just 14 or 15 years old. So state police, they quickly launched an investigation. Peline had been a Plymouth police officer since April of 2022. And she said in a department Facebook post honoring female officers that she had always wanted to be a police officer. But now she's on unpaid leave. And to be clear, yes, these are allegations. She hasn't been proven guilty. But the department did release a statement on Thursday after her arrest saying, quote, "We are appalled and deeply disturbed by the allegations. We hold our officers to the highest of standards and expect them to uphold their sworn duty both on duty and off. Our primary mission is to safeguard the public's trust and uphold the law. We value human life, fairness, integrity, accountability, and professionalism. The conduct alleged is in violation of our values and of our basic principles as police officers to serve and protect. While we respect the judicial process, we remain committed to a timely and thorough internal investigation to find the facts, review available evidence, and take appropriate administrative action. Officer Peline's duty status is currently under review," right? So basically, they're going to be looking at everything she did while she served as a member of law enforcement. Also, how she was hired. And let's also go to Furan. So he apparently runs a pest control business. It's called Pilgrim Pest Professionals. He and Peline, they were apparently raised in the Plymouth area. This is according to their attorneys. They reportedly live on a hobby farm together. And Furan also has a young daughter from his previous marriage. You see, while Peline's attorney said his client, quote, "didn't have so much as a speeding ticket," when you go to Furan and his alleged past behavior, that is what's drawn a lot of scrutiny right now. Why do I say that? So now I want to go to this direct reporting from the Boston Globe. It says, in 2019, police in Plymouth asked a judge to issue an order denying Furan a gun license, citing a laundry list of problems and conflicts, including numerous allegations of harassment and trespassing. Police described, quote, one incident wherein Mr. Furan texted his estranged wife 436 times in a 13-hour period, and another wherein he telephoned another person 700 times in a short period of time. His neighbors repeatedly complained about Furan mistreating his animals, which included horses, goats, chickens, and pigs. They complained about him shooting guns on his property, chasing a neighbor's dog with a machete, and using binoculars to watch them. He yells at people, it appears mostly women, and has put all of them in fear of him. His personality is that of a controlling, erratic, and angry person. He is manipulative and sinister. So now it seems that his wife has been pulled into the claims against him, and they both face just a full list of very serious felony charges. According to the district attorney, Furan is charged with 6 counts of indecent assault and battery, 12 counts of aggravated rape of a child, 1 count of assault and battery, and 1 count of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. Peline is charged with 3 counts of aggravated rape of a child and 1 count of statutory rape. Very, very serious. And as the attorneys, the court personnel, and the defendants themselves gathered in Plymouth District Court for arraignment on Thursday, I got to say, I don't think many of them were prepared for exactly what they heard. The hearing started off like any other, with the court being called to order, the judge asking about their pleas, motions, and bail. Let's take a look.
Commonwealth, I do not see any motion for pretrial detention. Do you want to be heard on bail?
Correct, Your Honor. The Commonwealth's not moving for dangerousness. I would like to be heard on cash bail along with conditions of release.
Okay. And are you aware of the requests of the
I am.
Commonwealth? Okay.
I'm not specifically aware of the conditions, but I could probably gauge what the request is going to be.
Okay. All right. So not guilty pleas are entered on behalf of both defendants at this time. And I will hear you, Commonwealth, in your request for bail.
Yes, Your Honor. So the Commonwealth's request is the same for both defendants. The Commonwealth is requesting $250,000 cash bail, along with the following conditions: that the defendants be ordered to stay away and have no contact with the alleged victim in this case, that they be ordered to stay away from children under the age of 18, that they surrender all firearms in their possession, that they remain in Massachusetts for the pendency of this case, and that they surrender passports to the court if they do have them.
But then what happened? Commonwealth Attorney, Plymouth Assistant DA James Duffy then launched into a disturbing litany of allegations that have been leveled against both Peline and Furan by their adopted son, who's an adult now. And I'm going to warn you right now, it is really tough to listen to.
The allegations before the court essentially date back to 2018. The alleged victim in this case in 2018 became a foster child of the two defendants before you. And just for clarity's sake, so there's no confusion, I intend to refer to the defendants by their first name so the court's aware who I'm talking about when I discuss which conduct. The allegations are that the alleged victim in this case moved in with the defendants back in 2018. At the time, the alleged victim was 14 years old. Fast forward to between May and June of 2019, when the alleged victim is still 14 years old, that's where the first allegation of sexual assault comes. This is against Daniel. The alleged victim in this case alleges that on that occasion, Daniel brought the alleged victim into the master bedroom at his home, that he then forced his into the alleged victim's mouth, that he forced the alleged victim to put his into Daniel's mouth, that he touched the alleged victim's and he forced the alleged victim to touch his. The alleged victim then discloses that this continues almost weekly for the next couple of years. Fast forward now to the fall of 2019. So at this point, the alleged victim would be 15 years old. It's alleged that on one occasion in the fall of 2019, specifically September after the defendants had been married, that Daniel was again sexually abusing the alleged victim in the bedroom when Samantha walked into the bedroom. It's disclosed that at this point, Samantha leaves the room and doesn't come back for the rest of the day. In October of 2019, Daniel summons the alleged victim to the bedroom. When the alleged victim walks into the bedroom, he sees Daniel having with Samantha. Daniel then removes the alleged victim's pants and instructs Samantha to perform on the alleged victim, which Samantha denies at that time. Fast forward to a week after that. So we're still in the fall of 2019 and the alleged victim is still 15 years old. There's another incident where Daniel, again, is sexually assaulting the alleged victim by forcing his into the alleged victim's mouth and forcing the alleged victim's into his mouth. Samantha walks into the room. At first, it's alleged that she goes into the bathroom and Daniel follows. They then come out of the bathroom and Samantha says, "I don't want to take his virginity." Daniel replies, "He's already lost his virginity." Samantha then is only wearing a bra. She lays down on the bed. Daniel then instructs the alleged victim to insert his into her. He does. While this is happening, when the alleged victim slows down, Daniel comes up behind the alleged victim and pushes him to force him to keep going on the intercourse. This happens numerous times through 2019 and carrying over into 2020. Most of the allegations take place in the home. There is an allegation that happened outside the home. This was an indecent assault and battery where it's alleged that Daniel touched the alleged victim while in a work truck in the county. This continues on with the three of them, with the alleged victim being forced to partake in these sexual encounters with Samantha and Daniel. And then it changes a little bit in about February of 2020. In February of 2020, there's an occasion where the alleged victim is laying on the couch with Samantha. Samantha gets up off the couch. She removes her clothes. She instructs the alleged victim to remove his clothes and then forces him to have with her at that point in time. Up until that point in time, the disclosure is that Daniel and Samantha and the alleged victim would only interact as a group of three. But from this point in February 2020, it now changed to where Samantha was performing these assaults on her own without Daniel being present. The allegations, Your Honor, that these sexual assaults in essentially these same details proceed until 2025. Those are essentially the allegations, Your Honor, that are before the court.
Wow. So, according to an affidavit, the alleged victim wrote when applying for a restraining order against the couple, which was reviewed by the Boston Globe, the man had apparently said that his grandmother and his aunt raised him from the age of 3 to 12. They then apparently introduced him to some, quote, church friends, so Peline and Furan. He started living with them and says they were granted legal guardianship about a year later, and that is when the alleged abuse started. So the prosecutor explained to the court why they were requesting such a large bail amount here.
The Commonwealth's request is due to the serious nature of these allegations and the potential flight risk that these defendants pose specifically. With the charges that the defendants are facing, obviously there are Superior Court only charges on here. They've now been charged, so their standing in the community has changed. They've formally been charged, and if they are eventually convicted of these charges, they're facing a significant mandatory minimum of 15 years, specifically on the aggravated rape through a joint venture theory. That's a significant mandatory minimum that they face, and the Commonwealth would argue that that changes their situation where they do become a flight risk given the allegations before the court. I will note for the court, they do not have criminal records. This is the first entry onto their criminal records. So the Commonwealth's request for bail along with conditions is based largely, in fact, is based on the allegations before the court to ensure that they continue to answer on these charges and to also protect the safety of the alleged victim in this case. So for those reasons, I would request $250,000 cash bail, a stay away no contact of the alleged victim, stay away from children under the age of 18, surrender all firearms, remain in Massachusetts, and surrender a passport. Also, Your Honor, the Commonwealth did file a motion to impound in regards to both defendants, and I do have motions for protective orders if I may just approach and file this with the court.
Now, the judge asked for a little bit more clarification on one of the charges that Furan faces. It's assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. Take a look.
Can you just give me a sentence or two about the assault and battery with a dangerous weapon with respect to
Yes, Your Honor.
Furan?
So there were occasions where Daniel would request that the alleged victim perform sexual acts on him, and the alleged victim would refuse. Specifically, there's an occasion in the summer of 2019 when they're in the kitchen of the home. Daniel requests a sex act. The alleged victim says no. Daniel then punches the alleged victim in the face. The victim falls to the ground, hits his head on the ground. That would be the basis of the assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. He then reaches into the alleged victim's pants and squeezes his. There were other occasions where he would demand that the alleged victim perform sex acts on him when he would say no, and he would either throw glasses at him or he would hit him physically.
So after those gross, shocking claims were entered into the record, Peline's attorney, Joseph Krowski Jr., turned the accusations on their head. And he revealed some very concerning apparent holes in this man's story.
On behalf of Samantha Peline, I am requesting that the court release her on her personal recognizance with the assented to condition that she have no contact, directly or indirectly, excepting through counsel, with any of the named witnesses or the named alleged victim. The Commonwealth has just told you that their standing in the community has now changed. Well, that is legally incorrect. Pursuant to our Declaration of Rights in Section 76, there is a presumption of personal recognizance. As you know, the bail statute has 28 criteria laid out for you to assess and determine what is the amount sufficient but not greater than necessary that will ensure these two individuals, specifically my client, comes to the court. Certainly the allegations, the mere allegations, are serious. Certainly the potential penalty is significant. But most of the criteria is designed answering the question and giving the court information about ties to the community and good evidence that the person will not flee the prosecution. With that in mind, Ms. Peline is 31 years old. She lives at the property right here in Plymouth, Massachusetts. She was born in South Shore Hospital in Weymouth, Massachusetts, but she was raised and spent her entire life here in Plymouth. She was educated, went to Plymouth South High School where she graduated, then went on and earned a bachelor degree from Salem State with a degree in criminal justice. After that, she worked at the Greater Plymouth Health and Families Service Center, there under the umbrella of the Kennedy Donovan Center. She was a family support advocate. She was gainfully employed. She was a revered employee, helped many families along the way. After that, she pursued her lifelong dream, and she was sworn into the Plymouth Police Department in 2022. She has worked there with distinction since 2022. My client doesn't have any entries on her carry. She doesn't have so much as a speeding ticket. I think the timeline is a little bit important for you to make your determination. First of all, this adult was never a foster child. He's now 21 years old. In June of 2028, there was no place else for him to go.
Sorry, counsel, I think you said 2028.
Excuse me, 2018. There was no place else for him to go. There was allegations made against his biological parents. There was an aunt that was doing the best but didn't have the faculties or facilities to take care of him. He certainly came to the home with some documented problems. He was on medication and he had several diagnoses. They right away, after being asked to take him in, entered into a guardianship about a month later. The timeline and what's alleged against him takes place over the course of 2019, 2020, 2021. I will tell you, at his urging, when he was an adult, at 18 years old, he urged them to legally and formally adopt him. At first, it was rebuffed because his biological father would not sign off on it, but he persisted, and when he was 18, they adopted him, and we have documentation, we have pictures of the celebration. This is after they allegedly had been physically assaulting him 3 to 4 times a week. I will tell you what's also important as it relates to the timeline. The government's assertion that they are a flight risk is belied by the actual history of the case. On March 17, 2026, now these are allegations that are 6, 7, years old. The allegations don't come to light till March 17, 2026. That's when he applies for a restraining order. When he applied for a restraining order, my client, Samantha Peline, was notified by her department and through other sources that she was now under investigation. I reached out, talked to Trooper Dunn. I knew the nature of the allegations against her. She has had 10 days to assemble resources and funds and whatever other means she has to flee. She has not done that. She has remained at the family home where they live. She has at all times been available, and her whereabouts have been known to the Commonwealth and to the state police. She has strong ties to the community. In that home, they have a significant property. They have a hobby farm. They have animals. The co-defendant has a 10-year-old daughter. They have a successful business with employees. All of their ties are right here to Plymouth County. They don't have the desire or the intent to go anyplace else. And the best evidence of that is them remaining here and facing these allegations. They were taken into custody this morning without any prior notice to counsel. We were in the middle of preparing for a restraining order hearing that's on for tomorrow. It's a little bit interesting in the restraining order hearing because the alleged victim went under oath and swore to certain things in front of Judge McDonough. And one of the things he swore to was that he felt that that my client posed a threat to his safety, posed a threat of imminent harm to his well-being. And he had told the judge that he moved out in either early February or late January of 2026. I think the timeline's really a distinction without the difference. But again, what he told her is that he was afraid for his safety, and he left the court with the implication that he had not had any contact with them, because he said specifically that he moved out early February and I've heard that they are looking for me. That's what he said under oath to get the restraining order. Well, it just so happens that on February 4th, after he moved out, he went to their home. He apologized for his conduct. He had engaged in a physical assault of Mr. Furan. Told them he was going to the Coast Guard. He asked to continue working at the company until April of 2026, during the same time where he's allegedly, purportedly afraid for his safety. He asked if he could go on a family trip with them to Jamaica. He asked them about a skiing trip to Sunday River. He asked if he could still come over for Sunday dinners. February 18th, he broke into the house with a ladder through a window. We have a witness verifying that he pulled up at the house to check on it because they were away and they saw his vehicle, the alleged victim's vehicle, in the driveway. February 27th, he's telling the court he's afraid for his safety. We have verification he asked for his job back and actually went back to work. March 2026, we have video of him showing up at the house in a pickup truck, a work truck that his father had given to him to sell. And the video shows them engaged in a cordial conversation talking about the fact that they got the truck running and are going to be able to resell it. This is only 18 or 19 days prior to when he applied for the restraining order, the same operative period of time when he said he was terrified of these two. March 7th, 2026, there's an encounter at a gas station with him and his father. He's with another female, a female named. They all engage in a cordial conversation. March 9th, 8 days before he goes under oath and is talking about Samantha Peline, there's a text exchange where he calls him and she texts back, "I missed your call. Are you all right?" This so-called alleged victim said, "Yeah, just tired. Need someone to talk to stay awake. Driving. Need someone to text." It's 8 days. Under oath, he said he was terrified then. March 11th, he actually sold the truck that had been gifted to him from his father for $3,100. March 12th, 5 days before he comes in under oath, he sends a text to Samantha with a picture of food he had cooked up. And she said, "Did you make that?" "Yeah, I did. I'm a chef." That's the type of conversation he's engaging in with her 5 days before coming in here and making these salacious allegations about when he was 14 or 15. March 13th, again, verification. He asked to remain on at pest control. March 13th, 4 days before that. What else do we have? Well, because of allegations made against this guy, not them, DCF had to come to the house on prior occasions. There was an allegation that he had engaged in inappropriate behavior with his stepsister. DCF came, and it's not that they were able to substantiate the allegations against him, but fully engaged in a vetting of the home, the suitability of the home. And you know from your experience, the fundamental questions are asked. Do you feel safe in the home? Has anyone abused you, either physically or sexually? And we can only assume that those were all checked negative because DCF unsubstantiated the complaints against him, but filed no further action against these two. So with DCF investigating this house on at least 2 prior occasions, there was no evidence of wrongdoing. We also know that there was a history with this young man. He was a problem, and we can document it. He had accused someone falsely of sexually inappropriate behavior when he was in high school, when he later came clean and admitted it was a sexual encounter he had with a teammate on his basketball team. Fast forward to December 2025 into January 2026. He's dating this young woman that's mentioned in the police report, and that's really the genesis of where this started. He wanted to do things his own way. He continued against the parents' wishes to have her stay over. They were concerned about a young child being in the house, him having her stay overnight. Continued to break the rules. We have him on 4:45 in the morning in late November, where he has told Judge McDonough that Mr. Furan assaulted him, and he described the incident. We have him jumping on Mr. Furan, putting him in a headlock, trying to choke him out where he's clearly the first aggressor. The real issue came to a head. We have a letter, and this is the person that's scared. We have a letter from his girlfriend where she accuses this so-called victim of raping her. And we have that letter. So this is a case that has viable defenses, but your fundamental question, and it's not a question of public safety. They didn't move pursuant to 58A. Brannigan doesn't allow you to consider public safety. The fundamental question is, are they going to do the right thing and appear? And the presumption is yes. And the evidence you have before you should point towards yes.
Now, Krowski also addressed Pelrine's career as a police officer, a position that requires the trust of the public.
Let me comment about this, about the fact that my client's a police officer. I don't come to you and say that a police officer should be treated any more favorably than any other civilian counterpart, but they certainly shouldn't be treated disproportionately unfavorably. I have clients all over the state charged with rape, and not one of them is held on anything close to this amount of bail. And there is something to be said that she's a police officer, because you know her ties to the community are strong, and she's been vetted. Her background's been vetted. Her personal history's been vetted. Her life in high school and in college, and any issues of discipline in high school and college have been successfully vetted. I'm asking you for $5,000 because I have no doubt, nor should you, that she will appear to face these charges, Judge.
Furan's attorney, Tamari Kovac, also spoke, reiterating what Krowski had said and providing a little more context.
Their son has been employed for my client, for Dan, for a few years. He wanted to go out on his own and see if he can, sort of start something, a business, or be successful, not tied to his father's business. So he applied for a job. It was with a ferry, and then for some reason there was some misunderstanding, and the alleged victim missed the meeting. So he texts Dan and asks for his job back. And like any supportive father, it's like, would you like to meet you want to meet at Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks? You pick. Now, if somebody who has been physically and sexually abusing somebody for years, is that the language you would use? You pick? He offers his son his job back. And there is not only is it just a cordial conversation, it is a conversation coming from love, from a father saying, I support you and I understand why you're looking for employment outside of the family business, but of course you're welcome back. I support you in your endeavors, and, I want you to be successful. That is the true thought. That is the true relationship. I also want to talk about some of these dates leading up to when he appears here on 3/17, saying how terrified he is. And I will get to obviously some of where my client, where he's from and his ties to the community. However, on the day that he came here to apply for the restraining order on 3/17, he had just called his mother, called Sam. She didn't pick up, but he had reached out to her. I was baffled when I read the affidavit for the restraining order, and I got a copy of it and I listened to it. And then I'm looking at the information that my client is providing me. We have videos of him. They're at the house. They are working. They are having cordial, what we might consider just mundane conversations about work. My client has, for many years, had a lot of security cameras. He has very expensive equipment that is kept at the home. You can see them. Your Honor, if you would like, I'm happy to approach. I have videos of their son driving into the property with Dan following his truck. It's very mundane conversations. I have video of my client being attacked by him. So interestingly, when he's 21 years old, he has a girlfriend who doesn't live close by. And the parents are like, we support you in this relationship, but we don't know her and she cannot sleep here. So what does he do? He keeps trying to sneak her into the house. When that's not working, he's with other people. They're waking up. There are people they don't know in the home. So this couple are sleeping in the trucks. They're putting tents up, and they have told them, you can, of course you can date her. She's welcome in, or she cannot sleep here. So at one night when they discover that they are there, he tells him, like, these are the rules. Like, you know the rules, you broke the rules. I want you out. If you don't leave, I'm going to call the police. And what does You can see it on the camera. He brutally attacks my client. And as a caring, loving father should do, he just, puts him to the desk, trying to stop him, telling him, stop, stop, stop. Is somebody who is abusing their son the way that he is alleging, do you say, I'm going to call the police? This troubled young man had not been following the house rules. And then it finally was enough. You need to find somewhere else to live. So this is what he does. And then he fabricates these allegations for attention with the biological family. Only he knows the motivation. However, when he came to court, he was disingenuous. He was manipulative. He does not tell the judge, hey, also, I just called Sam today. I've been talking to them. I've been employed by him this entire time. I am at the house regularly. They are texting like, hey, we set aside, we have a text string. We set aside some shelves so that you can store some of your boxes because there was some water damage. So they're going to be renovating that part of the house. So here's where you can keep some of your things. These are just conversations that you would expect of any, between an adult child and loving parents. He didn't have to live there, Your Honor. In 2025, I believe he was making about $80,000, 2024 making over $50,000. So this is not a vulnerable person who has no place to go and is forced to live at this house. This is where he chose to live every day.
Now, the judge herself seemed a bit shaken by everything that had just come out in the courtroom. So she announced her decision on bail. She extended the protective order on behalf of the alleged victim that had been set to expire today. This is according to the Boston Globe. Take a look.
After hearing, the court sets, with respect to Samantha Peline, the court sets bail in the amount of $10,000 as conditions. If she should meet that bail, she is to have no contact and stay away with the complaining witness in this matter, surrender the passport, remain in Massachusetts, and surrender any firearms. If you violate any of those conditions that the court is setting, your bail may be revoked and you could be held in custody in a house of correction without trial. That includes any new offenses that you may commit in that period of time as well. With respect to Daniel Furan, bail is set in the amount of $25,000 cash. The conditions, if he should make that bail, are that he's to have no contact and stay away with the complaining witness, surrender his passport, remain in Massachusetts, surrender any firearms. Sir, you as well, if you commit a new offense or you violate any of those conditions of your release could be revoked and you could be held in custody in a house of correction without bail for up to 90 days or until the time of your trial.
So Peline, Furan, both posted their bonds. They left the courthouse together. Local reporters, as you can imagine, just swarmed them, asked for their reactions to the allegations, but their attorneys basically said no comment. The judge also impounded all documents related to the case until at least April 30th, so they're going to remain sealed for now. Not surprising when you're dealing with accusations regarding a then minor, and the two are back in court on June 8th.
All right, so obviously a very troubling story, and I have some notes, have some thoughts on this situation. And one of the first thing that comes to mind is that this is not the first time, and it wouldn't be the last time that I've heard of situations and scenarios where adults are taking advantage of foster kids. And the reason why I put foster kids in air quotes is that oftentimes it's not just, it definitely can happen in the sense of foster kids that are in state custody, county custody, those sorts of things. But oftentimes it can happen, if you remember, or if you heard in the video, this was a family that they met in church, a church friend or something along those lines that was an aunt that was having trouble with their nephew that was struggling, a child that was bouncing around from home to home. I'm not sure exactly. I don't remember exactly what was happening with the biological parents, but you hear a lot of scenarios like this where there's an uncle, there's an aunt, a friend or a family member that will take a child in that doesn't belong to them. It's just a friend of a friend or a friend of a family member. And quite often, that friend or family member has a lot of resources, not just some, not just like somewhat better, but a lot of resources, right? They, in this situation, they have a successful business. Obviously, she is a police officer, so they're doing, sounds like they're doing pretty well for themselves. And quite often you hear stories like this, and what people who may not work in the line of business with abuse or abuse victims and things like that may not quite understand is that oftentimes becomes a part of the abuse. You hear this a lot in terms of domestic violence, where someone might be the breadwinner and they will provide an extremely lavish lifestyle, fancy trips, fancy home. But then on the other end, they are completely abusing this person, and not only going beyond just mistreatment, but completely abusing this person mentally, physically, verbally, emotionally. And oftentimes what happens is that this becomes a part of the love bomb if we're talking about dating and romantic relationships. But when we talk about love bombing, a lot of times people don't realize that love bombing isn't just for romantic relationships. It is also for situations like this. I have no doubts in my mind that in this situation, when the child or the alleged victim in this situation arrived at this home, they were likely love bombed and treated with extravagant gifts. They probably had a much better room in life than what they had ever experienced with not only with their biological parents, but also with the aunt that they were staying with. And it sounds like the alleged victim may have bounced around quite a bit with their family members. And this is what people don't understand, is that this is a part of the abuse. It's not isolated or different or separated from the abuse. And for those of you who have been abuse victims, whether it be domestic violence or childhood, this also makes things more difficult for the victim to challenge things, because the perpetrator oftentimes in this situation, well, you've never experienced this before. And oftentimes this leads to gaslighting and a lot of confusing situations where the perpetrators in the situations like this will, well, you've never been to, before you got here, you never ate like this before. You told me yourself that, that you used to get starved and beat and this and that. And so it's a combination of not only being love bombed, but also where your vulnerabilities, oftentimes a situation like this, are also being weaponized against you. This also leads to not only the perpetrator oftentimes having an alibi, or I use alibi very loosely, but they will try to use this as an alibi. And you hear this a lot in this clip with them, with their attorneys saying things like how well they took care of him, and he didn't have anything before. And from the outside looking in, and a lot of times with abuse perpetrators' stories, they will over exaggerate the love bomb and the things that they've done, right? And completely downplay the mistreatment and completely downplay the sex abuse. And sometimes, and will paint a picture as though the two can't coincide, right? That if someone is abusive, that they can't also do things for them. But what I tell people, what I've told people in the past, victims of abuse, is that manipulation, power, control, those sorts of things, abuse, don't have, or it's difficult for those things to happen. Manipulation can't happen without a handful of good times, right? If someone is abusive all the time, his family likely wouldn't have sent him there, right? He wouldn't stay there. He may have ran away, things like that. But when someone is treating you well, sometimes, right, even sometimes, a majority of the times in some abuse situations, that's what makes it more confusing. And that's what actually gets the victims hooked. That's what people call a trauma bond. And the problem really right now with people explaining these type of topics when we talk about on social media or here on YouTube is that people will only think that this can only happen in romantic relationships, when it can happen in this situation. It can happen in, I've worked with victims in the past with situations like this in workplace dynamics too, where they get all sorts of promotions and all sorts of accolades and bonuses and things that they, quote, will never get anywhere else. but then the boss and supervisors and coworkers will completely mistreat them, workplace abuse and those sorts of things. And so the two most definitely can coincide. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is that oftentimes, and again, I'm going to use air quotes for foster, people will when people are fostering kids from the church or friends of friends and those sorts of things, oftentimes people who are predators, they are targeting children in these type of dynamics and in these type of situations. They're looking for people with a troubled past. And you heard this towards the end of the clip, and this also in their mind provides kind of an alibi. They were a troubled kid. They've lied before. They've stolen before. So they're targeting people who have a troubled past, because in their mind that if they have a troubled past and if they've done bad things, then you can convince other people that this also, what they're saying, is also a lie, right? And it provides reasonable doubt. But in a lot of situations, the things that they're saying in terms of the accusations, a lot of times can be true. Now, I do want to give a disclaimer. They're going through the court proceedings. So everyone in this situation is innocent until proven guilty. However, it would not surprise me if these things are true because of the nature of the situation. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, they were very quick to toss around the alleged victims' past, but I want to talk about Daniel, the husband's past. That behavior of him calling people hundreds of times, over a time period, of him being abusive and aggressive towards women, really alludes to someone who would engage in this type of behavior. It's very common for people to engage in this type of behavior, and not only engage in this type of behavior, but also pull the wife, or in other situations, the husband in, or the spouse or significant other in, into these situations. If I had to provide an educated guess on this situation, I would say that Daniel is likely the ringleader in this situation. And as I say this does not excuse Samantha's behavior, but she is more than likely also a victim of Daniel's abuse. And then what I tell people is that sometimes people can be both a victim and a perpetrator all at the same time. And this can be very confusing for people, especially people who have been, or I've worked with people who were kind of doing both, where they were engaging in abusive behavior and they were also the victim, where it's like, on one hand, you are afraid of the punishment of the abuse if you don't participate. And then so you do. And then on the other hand, you don't think about the fact that you are also causing and creating trauma all at the same time. But his behavior aligns with not only him being more likely the ringleader in this situation, but also someone who is probably pretty high up there on the cluster B spectrum. I would be really surprised if this was the only victim that was out there. Now, we may not hear about any other victims or anything like that, but I would be very, very surprised if there weren't other victims out there. In terms of other minors, we do know that there's other significant other victims, because that was talked about in the story, and people have talked about how his behavior towards women and how he treated and how he talked to women. I would be surprised if there weren't other victims in his circle when it comes to his business. But I would suspect that in this situation that he would more than likely be the ringleader, and then his Samantha, and again, not excusing her behavior, began to become more accustomed to living that vicarious life. And so the third thing I want to bring up is this conversation that their attorneys brought up, as far as the alleged victim in this situation, going back to them for help, going back to them for a job, wanting to go on trips and vacations with them, going back to them for Sunday dinners. So what I alluded to, and I talked about trauma bonds earlier, and sometimes this can kind of cross over into Stockholm syndrome. in these type of dynamics. And a lot of times people think that Stockholm syndrome, and again, trauma bonds and these type of terms that people toss around and use on social media only apply to not only abuse victims, but domestic violence victims, but only women. But that's 100% not true. That they can apply in these type of situations as well. You have to remember that this victim, alleged victim in this situation, came from a very dark upbringing to begin with before he or she he landed with Daniel and Samantha in this situation. And it sounds like not only did this person have a troubled past, not only did this person was possibly also abused by their biological parents. Probably, it sounds like there was definitely some neglect. If I had to kind of give an estimated guess on some of the things that were happening prior to landing with Daniel and Samantha. And what people have to understand about abuse, and going back to what I mentioned before, that manipulation and those type of things can't happen without some good times in between, is that some of those good times, good times, being loved, being cherished, feel good even if the person is mistreating you. And this can be very confusing for people who are not victims and people who are on the outside looking in or don't quite understand this type of world. But mentally, physically, subconsciously, emotionally, some love feels better than none, right? This is the reason why isolation in a lot of situations is so terrible for people, because you find yourself allowing for people to mistreat you because they're offering, some love. And this is why, and how you hear people ending up in toxic relationships and unhealthy relationships all the time. And so it doesn't surprise me, right, that if those things were true, that he reached out to them for Sunday dinners and reached out to them for a job. And there also, you have to remember that this is also a young man who was still dependent on them. It sounds like he couldn't go to his biological parents. Sounds like he probably couldn't go to his aunts, and doesn't have like the type of family stability that he could rely on them for resources. And so this might, I understand that the defense is painting this picture, but from a therapeutic, and I understand why the defense is painting this type of picture, but from a therapeutic standpoint, I hear and see kids do this all the time. Adult children who have gone back to parents who are highly, highly abusive because they really had no other place to turn. And you see this with domestic violence victims, because the perpetrators in these type of situations oftentimes do a really good job of isolating you from other people. They want you to be dependent on them. They want you to come back to them for resources. They want you to because what happens is that this creates loyalty, right? Where it makes it less likely that you're going to say anything. And also because you're, quote, benefiting from them, from their lifestyle, it makes it less likely that you're going to want to press charges against them or to report them. And you hear this all the time in domestic violence situations. I'm bringing up domestic violence because there's a lot of parallels. And I think that a lot of people, most people as adults, most people who watch and listen to my podcast have either experienced or know people who have experienced domestic violence. And so it's easy to see just from that lens that someone can be over reliant on someone who might have resources, but also might treat them terribly. And this is the reason why people might stay in those bad situations. And so it doesn't surprise me at all if he felt alone, if he felt isolated, if the alleged victim, they were talking about this girlfriend that he had, if they didn't work out and he had no one else to talk to. You have to remember, especially as a young person, he may not have known anything else. And this is also something that isn't talked about enough. He may not have known other people, didn't have community, but also didn't know anything else besides the love bombing and the abuse. And so for him, even though he may have known and understood that this was wrong, he obviously understood that it was wrong enough to report it. He also doesn't know anything else in terms of like this is his normal, right? And when I also a part of this being his normal, what people who are victims of abuse sometimes struggle to see is they don't see the pattern. They don't see this abuse wheel where it goes from where they might be being love bombed and treated well for a period of time, but they don't see that there's going to be a cycle of abuse, that abuse is eventually going to end up happening again and again and over again. And so sometimes people will look at some, certain circumstances and they'll say, well, at least Sunday dinner is fine, right? At least Sunday, some people will say, people who have grown up in abusive households, they might say, well, whenever we went to baseball games, everything was great. Or whenever we had dessert together, those were actually good times. And so they think that they can isolate the alleged victims sometimes think that they can isolate the good times, right? Not realizing that you accepting the good times, it's just a matter of time before the bad starts to happen again, because it's a part of the pattern and it's a part of the cycle. And you accepting this is in the abusive person's mind is not only allowing, but also enabling them to continue that bad behavior. But that's all I got for you today. Let me know your thoughts on this case and some of the things that I may have said in the comments down below. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. Be sure to turn on notifications so you're notified every time I upload a new video. With that being said, I will see you in the next episode, and you guys have a good one.